Mr. Deepak Sapra, CEO API and Service at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, leading global API and pharma services operations, and IIM Bangalore graduate. He focuses on innovations, AI-driven drug discoveries, and expanding access to affordable healthcare worldwide. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, to moderate this session, I would like to invite Mr. Aman Sivaj, Director Global Markets at the Clinton Health Access Initiative, with strong expertise in market access strategies and digital health. He works to harness partnership and innovation to make healthcare system more accessible and efficient. Pleasure having you here and looking forward for this session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Shania. Looking forward to this conversation, although I have to say that we moved from an all-woman panel to an all-male panel. It's always hard to trump women, so I'm not going to try and do that. Thank you very much for joining us today for this interesting discussion. Pharma, producing for the world, both in the pharmaceutical sector, and how do we translate that for technology, specifically AI. I'd like to start with a quote from Steve Case from his book, The Third Wave, where he talks about that the first and the second wave were all about setting up infrastructure and on then mounting social media apps which have taken over the world today. The third wave is going to be more integral to bringing technology to core frameworks such as healthcare. And the three panelists that we have today are at the forefront of doing exactly that. I'm going to start with Deepak, who's on my right. And I heard one theme very consistent in the previous session of trust and integrity. And when it comes to Dr. Reddy's, Dr. Reddy's has been the epitome and flag bearer of building trust and with integrity across the world. How challenging has it been to really transform from being a domestic player to being an international player? And what were the challenges they faced? And what are the learnings that the tech and the AI companies can adopt and embed in their journey of becoming leaders for the healthcare industry in the next decade or so? So Deepak, over to you.
Thank you, Aman. It's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking on something that's very close to my heart. So, thank you for the kind words on Dr. Reddy's. I would like to expand it to India and Indian pharma in general. India is well recognized as the pharmacy of the world. India is well recognized as a provider of generic medicines and vaccines around the world. More than 90% of the UN's essential medicines come from India. 60% of the world's vaccines are made in India. Even in a country like the US, 40% of the generics that are consumed by the US population is made in India. So I think there is a very strong recognition of the quality of the products made by India that goes around the world. Now this has not happened overnight, this has happened over 2 or 3 decades, essentially leveraging a few things. The first was, how can we become self-sufficient? If you go back to the 80s, India was dependent on imports for the majority of its pharmaceutical products. But India chose to take a path of self-reliance, essentially around skills in chemistry, around manufacturing at scale so that you're able to get products all over the world, and dovetailing it with very strong understanding of the regulatory frameworks around the world. As a consequence of that, you see Indian medicines being available all over the world and well recognized, well respected. If Indian medicines were not there, the whole healthcare ecosystem of the world would perhaps collapse. So the question for us is, how can we leverage this learning and what can we do for the future? So there are a couple of things around this. Medicines are about cure. Diagnostics to a large extent are about prevention. So if you're able to prevent, then you don't need to cure. There is some statistic which says that for every dollar that you spend on prevention, you save about $15 on cure. So there's a dramatic impact that that the right diagnostics can have. Now, the pharma and the therapeutics were built around cost and manufacturing at scale. Those are the things which help India get to where India has got today. The diagnostics are going to be built not just on cost and manufacturing at scale, but around using intelligence and data in a manner that is adaptive and is related to the needs of the Indian population. I think if we are able to use this platform, overlay it with data and intelligence in a manner that it helps us address healthcare issues before they arrive. So you're determining what to fix, pharma fixes what is required to be fixed. So to determine what is fixed, what is to be fixed helps you address this in a manner that is more sustainable, more cost effective, and can perhaps impact 5 to 6 billion of the 8 billion people in the world who currently are not fully served through the healthcare systems. So I see that as a huge opportunity, Aman.
Thank you, Deepak, and you've given me a segue to move to Satish. You bring out a very interesting point of lack of diagnostics, which is leading to a high burden on tertiary care. And I absolutely agree, in the global health or public health space, primary health care is the missing link. And Satish, one instrument or equipment that every healthcare professional associates with is a stethoscope. And you've revolutionized that to bring or integrate AI into that, and how that is enabling better diagnosis. And I would never say that it is a competition to a doctor, but it is an enabler. And I think technology has to be an enabler. So what your experience has been in terms of launching this niche product and implementing it across the country, and what challenges you're facing when you're wanting to translate this into outside world beyond India, and what's your plan there? So long one.
Yeah, thanks, Aman. So I think I'll probably just go back to when I graduated medicine. I come from a family of doctors. So if you ask how does a doctor diagnose a patient, there were three fundamental steps which we were taught. 50% comes from the history, and 20-30% you do general physical examination where you use a stethoscope, you check the heart lung sounds, you check the pulse. So these two steps used to take you closer to what is called as a differential diagnosis. And 20-30 years back, probably you used a chest x-ray or a CT MRI to then confirm your diagnosis. But somewhere down the line, these things got flipped. And if you see, not many doctors have time to even take history. So we went back to the drawing board, and instead of building one more device which goes into the hospital, and it's sad to say that even in 2026, 50% of the world's population does not have access to essential healthcare services. So we thought, let's not just follow the trend, but think from a fundamental core principles. And stethoscope is also like a identity of a doctor. But then the difference was when we learned the art of auscultation. Even literature says that it takes about 5 to 7 years to learn that expertise and identify the nuances of what's a normal heart sound, what's a normal lung sound. Then we kind of look at India's statistics. For 1.4 billion population, we just have close to 6,000 cardiologists and about 3,000 pulmonologists. So I started my career with Dr. Devi Shetty, learned most of my bedside manners and how do you talk to a patient, all of that. But just imagine, you can't take Dr. Devi Shetty or someone like a Naresh Trian to 6 to 7 lakh of villages of India. So our thought process was, how do we kind of get these expertise in the form of technology and then do a task shifting? Can we get this to an MBBS doctor, to a nurse, and then to an ASHA worker? That was the thought process. And Also, when you look at going deep into what's the role of technology, uh, there are only 30 to 35% who are acoustic learners. 60 to 65% are visual learners, and 5% is kinesthetic. So the idea got inspired from cricket sneakometer. Like till 2012, the caught behind decision used to be taken by the umpires, whom I consider as cardiologists or pulmonologists. They are the experts. But now, once you have the sneakometer, it can identify whether the ball touched a bat or a pad. That is like democratizing, right? Like whoever is watching the cricket match on television, they can decide better than the umpires once they see the signature pattern. So we kind of brought in that technology, eliminated the subjectivity. So it's not just acoustics. AI Strength is a platform which has got device data and intelligence. We collect like 30 seconds of heart sounds, 60 seconds of lung sounds, convert the acoustics into visual signature pattern. And once it gets uploaded to the cloud, it analyzes. I'm a doctor and I can say very comfortably this is a huge ego hit for the doctors. Uh, Most of the PHCs are manned by, let's say, MBBS physicians who have just graduated. The accuracy is only 50 to 60%. It's not just about the clinical skills. Think, I started my clinical practice in a government OPD. It's not like NHS UK, where you have one patient and one doctor. There are 50 patients in front of a doctor. There is a child crying, there is a fan, there is so much of noise. So most of these murmurs, which are the early indicators of valvular heart disorders, are less than 100 hertz. As you enter the clinical practice, your hearing range reduces. Multiple factors. So what you might miss seeing, you see in the report. That is how you increase the adoption. Coming to the challenges, it's dime a dozen, I would say. This was even before AIML was a buzzword. When we started pitching in 2018, nobody believed in India. And that was also one of the reasons why we started. Just think of it. Indian doctors are probably the most well respected globally. We produce the highest number of nurses and contribute to the whole world. But go through all the textbooks, you name a disease which is named after an Indian doctor, hardly there, because our patient volume load is so high, we don't have time for research, except for AMC, load and so on. So that is how we thought, why should we still import 80% of medical devices? It's been a long journey. Even today we get rejected. It's such a dumb device. Why do you want to even reinvent? But now, in the last 2 to 3 years, we have deployed AI Strength. Very proud to say that we started from Maharashtra. In Satara, Asha worker takes this device, does door-to-door screening, and the use case is instead of referring 10,000 villagers to Pune or Mumbai for echocardiograph, which takes like 1 to 2 days, each test is 30 to 45 minutes. We are able to do this preliminary screening in 30 to 60 seconds. And then what used to be an expertise of a cardiologist is being done by an ASHA worker, and then there is a referral pathway. So I think it's been a tough journey. Healthcare is a laggard when it comes to adoption to new technologies. Probably 20 years back, we all used to go to the bank to withdraw cash, but now probably nobody carries cash, right? It takes time, but when India kind of innovates, we leapfrog, I would say. So those have been the experiences.
Thank you, Satish, for those insights. And for right reasons, healthcare is slow because it needs to be responsible, and so that's good. And from there comes responsible AI, and also I would say moving from medicine to preliminary diagnosis to specialized diagnosis. We started on the journey of screening for TB using image classification, and DeepTek has been a pioneer on that. But I would like to know from you, Ajit, how has the journey been there, and how does this essentially transition from here to lung health or all the aspects of radiology?
No, thanks, Aman. Really, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I think medical imaging AI, the use of AI in medical imaging is a huge global opportunity. I think in quite a few cities globally, already autonomous cabs are running on the street without human intervention. And you can imagine medical imaging equipments like CT scanners, MRIs, X-ray machines are churning out images, and those could be well interpreted by AI and transform the workflows of image reporting, make it more cost effective, more accurate, and more accessible. And the opportunity there, Aman, is also multiplied by the fact that there's a huge shortage of radiologists. I think people are not aware, but India has only 12,000 radiologists who do cross-sectional imaging for a population of 1.4 odd billion. And not only India, but even developed economies like UK, Japan, Singapore have a severe shortage of radiologists. In fact, in the US too, US has a fairly high ratio of number of radiologists to the population. But the imaging modalities are becoming a commodity. The number of scans are just growing at a double-digit CAGR year on year. And the demand on radiologists is increasing extremely exponentially, if I may say so. But I am coming from the US, and we are seeing that the cost of reporting a scan in the US is dramatically growing in the last 1 year itself, and the demand or access to radiologists is becoming a big challenge. So that's the opportunity. I think AI can really come in, transform the radiology workflows, and improve quality and speed of reporting. We started on the journey about 8 years back, and we have today more than 1,500 sites globally, across US, across Europe, Asia Pacific, Japan, Singapore, and other countries. Our technologies touch almost 10,000 patients every day. So every 5 seconds, one life is touched by our technology. And you talked about tuberculosis screening. That's one very important use case. WHO has a goal to stop TB by 2030. And that calls for almost 60% of the population across Africa, Asia Pacific, South America to be screened on a chest X-ray. And you can imagine the volumes are so high, no human can read those scans. So WHO has done an excellent job. They have set up a pre-qualification process, and one of our product is one of the recommended products from WHO. So today we are the leaders in India in the TB space. We have screened more than 3 million people across India. And we have delivered amazing value. We have seen that the cost of identifying one TB patient goes down by as much as 45%. Even AI is being used. We have identified that the quality adjusted life here, as it is called. Because of AI reading the X-ray, you can identify TB in a subclinical stage, even before the symptoms come up. And that way you can treat the patient, have an impact on the patient's quality of life. So the quality adjusted life here improves by almost 60% through the use of AI. So the outcomes have been amazing. Beyond TB and public health, our products are being used in hospitals and imaging centers. For example, our platform Augmento is a national platform in Singapore across all public hospitals. And the research outcomes from Singapore indicate that there is almost a 90% improvement in productivity of radiologists when AI is being used. And there is a 74% improvement in turnaround time of reports. So I think AI has tremendous opportunity in the medical imaging diagnostic space, and I think that's we are just at the beginning of the journey there. I think a lot more has to be done in the coming years.
Thank you, Ajit, and I think gives us a guidance towards producing for the world, really. So you mentioned you are in 1,500 centers, and whilst access to data is a challenge, I think access to structured data is even a bigger challenge, or classified data which has been reported upon. What do you see as an opportunity where this could potentially be a use case for Indian companies to step in and provide for the world quality algorithms which can expand from, say, TB today to the complete gamut of radiology? And yeah.
No, absolutely. I think India has a democratic dividend in the sense that it has the largest population the healthcare ecosystem is fairly strong, and the tech infrastructure in health industry is reliably established actually. As we move into the AI era, we need to look at how we can leverage that data actually, which we have in the country, how we can aggregate that data, and how we can make it available for AI developers. I think when we aggregate data, it is not just about the volume of data we aggregate, but the richness of data. And I think, if I may say so, to a certain extent, India has such diversity in it, in terms of genomics as well, that advantage we can capture in the Indian data is humongous. Data privacy is a very important issue. And as a result of that, the cost of access to healthcare data is very, very expensive, especially in developed economies. So when you go to US or Japan and you try to access data there, for an AI company to be able to access large and rich data is extremely expensive. Whereas in India, I think we have that advantage today. And if in the regulatory process we can have the right balance between this information security and making sure that patient private information is properly protected, and being able to provide data, aggregated data, in a cost-effective way to the AI developers, I think there's a humongous opportunity. I want to step back and talk about Singapore. Our colleague is here from Singapore. I think we have been lucky to work with the Singapore government for 5+ years now, and I see that they have been able to visualize this journey much ahead of time. And the infrastructure to kind of aggregate data across all public hospitals, and to aggregate in a fashion that it can be mined very easily by AI companies, AI model developers, is a very important national vision. And there's a bit of an investment essential there, and I believe all economies, especially India, I think, has the advantage of data, but we need to go ahead and invest into infrastructure where we can aggregate the data in an effective way and make it accessible to the AI developers.
Thank you, Ajit. I want to come back to Deepak, and whilst we are talking about prevention, diagnostics, the core still remains that you need the medicines to be available. How is Dr. Reddy's looking at using the technology to either fast track drug development or really integrate diagnostics into reaching patients early, as you highlighted, that if you can reach them early, you can also reduce costs significantly. So if you can give us some insights on what the next steps would look like.
So the journey of a medicine starts from drug development, from drug discovery to development to at-scale manufacturing and eventually taking it to the patients. So there is a tremendous amount of opportunity that is there for the use of technology in each of these steps. At the moment, we've taken some baby steps. I can share those examples. As far as drug discovery is concerned, it's all about chemistry. Once you identify what is the target, what is the unmet medical need you want to address, you go through a process of identifying the compounds, and those compounds would then, some of them would meet what you want to go ahead with, and then take it forward in the journey. So this process of identifying the compounds, from screening from thousands of compounds to those 5 or 10 which you would take forward, used to be a laborious process done in a wet lab, physically in a laboratory. Now a lot of it can be simulated through technology, because you have data around reactions, you have data around how a certain molecule would behave when it gets into a certain point. So all of that can be simulated. So maybe instead of running 100 reactions in a lab, you can run 5 and you can move it forward. So you save time, you save cost, and you're able to be much more accurate in terms of predicting what will work thereafter. Then a huge amount of time in the development process is taken by clinical trials, animal studies, in vitro studies. A lot of it can be simulated again through data that's already available, and mine that data to predict what might help you move the molecule forward, both in terms of safety and also in terms of potential efficacy. There are even models like organ on a chip, which allow you to simulate the effect of a drug on an organ without physically putting it in a human being. So it will not eliminate the need for clinical trials, but it will dramatically cut down the scale and scope, and therefore the time and cost, which is one of the main impediments as far as the drug development process is concerned. For those of you who are in it, you are aware that the drug development process takes 10 to 12 years, costs about $2 to $3 billion, and the probability of success when you get started is like 1 in 10,000, eventually going to about 1 in 3, even at the penultimate step. So it's a time-consuming, costly, and expensive process. With low probability of success, you can dramatically alter these parameters, improve the probability, cut the cost, reduce the time by adopting technology through the process. And then one last point, even after you've discovered a drug, you need to make it to scale. Your ability to make it to scale will depend on how efficiently you're able to do it, because your efficiency will determine the ability of access across the world. Cost is a very important factor in access, and your ability to identify what would be the right set of input parameters which eventually give you the best output in terms of yield, in terms of losses, in terms of cutting waste, is what we call in our language a golden tunnel, which if you go through, you're able to get your cost down to the lowest level. And by getting your cost down, you're able to improve access, you're able to have a lot many more people get the benefit of your medication.
Thanks, Deepak, and just to give the audience an example of it, Deepak from Dr. Reddy's and self from Clinton Health Access Initiative in 2025 partnered to improve access to an HIV prevention twice a year drug, bringing down the price from $28,000 to $40 per year. So that's what we are talking about in terms of access and affordability, to really make that impact and be able to reach, maybe 60 to 70% of the world population at the price that it is accessible. Coming to you, I just want to check with you, Satish. Stethoscope being such a critical instrument and can also be provided even at sub-center level. And I did have an interaction back in the day in Manipur where we were speaking to some healthcare professionals, and they were so excited to use something like an AI steth and be able to assist doctors who, through the Indian program of eSanjeevani. So eSanjeevani is a telemedicine portal through which the doctors are able to reach remote patients remotely, and it does almost 1 million patients a day in terms of screening. So how are you thinking in terms of future? What all is AI steth will be able to do? You talked about cardiology, but I think there are 23 respiratory disorders that it could potentially address. So how do you see that and then scaling it up for the world?
So, yes, that is a platform play for us, and there's a lot beyond technology, I would say. I think the adoption has been much better with the government programs. Currently, it's being used as part of the adult NCDs screening program, and the second as part of RBSK for children who have hole in the heart, congenital heart disorders. But more important here, the more than doctors, the nurse and allied healthcare workers, they see this as an aspirational device, because I think doctors probably use it to check BP, and this is like their bread and butter. But for the others, they feel that they are part of a national mission. They are so proud when they learn the art of auscultation. And the other thing, I think it's been 20 years where stethoscope has been written off, like it's no longer useless and so on. But you have to understand that doctor-patient relationship, whatever it is, like that human touch is important. And unless you touch the patient with a stethoscope, they feel that the consultation is not over, even for the patients. Now, coming to the clinical segments, currently we have done our pilot study for valvular heart disorders. ICMR is doing a multi-center trial. The Ministry of Health is doing a health technology assessment. we see that there are 6 disease segments which we can impact at a primary healthcare clinic: valvular heart disorders, heart failure, and in fact we got excellent feedback for the lung sound, which is currently at R&D stage. Our current algorithms can identify whether a given lung sound is normal or has an adventitious lung sound. So this would impact COPD, asthma, tuberculosis and childhood pneumonia. And it's important to understand tuberculosis. India still has got 1 million missing cases. These could be asymptomatic, don't even enter the healthcare value chain, and especially for the pediatric age group, it's difficult to put them under a chest X-ray, the imaging exposure. It's difficult to get the sputum. So this is where even like Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, they gave good feedback. We should definitely explore this. And instead of deploying a chest X-ray for community screening, the cost is also there because US has got a lot of point of care ultrasound. But think of it, is it easy to train the community health workers on using a stethoscope or training a workforce how to use ultrasound? So I think, as Deepak rightly said, the preventive care is always much easier, cost effective, and then the reactive or that comes further. So when we started, we focused on cardiology. We have discovered so many use cases, even in nephrology, because it's such a fundamental device. Yeah, most anesthesiologists use it after any surgery, whether the bowel sounds have returned before they send the patient out. So now, initially the product was used mainly by ASHA workers, nurse and MBBS doctors. We have half a dozen studies happening in tertiary care institutes where the HODs now see a pattern. If this is a murmur, probably there's a likelihood of aortic stenosis. So the sudden cardiac death in patients who have aortic stenosis and atrial fibrillation, the chances of sudden cardiac death are much higher. So and then, but the sad fact is, see, US we know the incidence is 2.5% for valvular heart disorders. India, you ask a question, nobody knows this answer. So we are the first ones to do multiple studies. And why this is important? Because there's a lot of talk about acute cardiac events, heart attack, but valvular heart disorders is a silent epidemic. While rheumatic heart disease has reduced, but secondary to hypertension, that's going to really increase in the next 10 years. So now using something as fundamental as a stethoscope, we can see when a person would go from mild to moderate to severe categories. So instead of like even the company's mission is screen, detect and predict. So I think we have solved the first two and now we are working on predictive use cases.
Thank you, Satish. And I can give an example. World Bank had set up a very large program in Uttarakhand by connecting or providing internet connectivity for connecting with doctors, sub-centers, and there were about 100 doctors sitting in Dehradun listening to or providing preliminary diagnosis to patients. When we did go down to the villages and spoke to some of the folks as to how their experience had been, their point was, हमको stethoscope तो लगाया भी नहीं. So that's where, so it's super important, and I absolutely agree with you. I do want to come back to you, Ajit, and want to also take advantage of having Deepak on the stage. Where do you see this partnership going? Like, how can image classification or AI diagnostics partner with a pharmaceutical company to really reach more patients early and treat faster? So what would be your one wish that you would have to have, which maybe Deepak can look at when he goes back to his office?
Absolutely. I think I have a big check later after this session. But there is amazing opportunity for medical imaging AI and pharmaceutical companies to collaborate on. And I think, as you correctly said, early diagnosis is a very critical aspect. Let me give you one example is of identifying patients having lung nodules which are malignant. If you are able to identify a patient early, in the early stage, the survival possibility of the patient increases by almost 95%. And today, if you go to any hospital, 33% of all imaging scans happening are chest X-rays. Now you could have an AI engine listening at the back and checking all the X-rays and identifying if there are any incidental lung nodule findings on the chest. The patient could have come for some other reason, cough or cold, but then you're also checking if there's a lung nodule which has the potential to be malignant. And if you catch the patient early, there are two advantages. One is, of course, the patient can undergo medication and recover faster. But also from a pharmaceutical company's point of view, I think the size of the market increases substantially because you are able to get far more candidates who might be needing your medication. And secondly, the efficacy of your product can be more established because when you are treating a patient in the early stage, the recovery of the patient through medication is far better and the impact on the patient is much higher in that sense. So I think the substantial opportunity like this of using medical imaging and I talked about lung nodule or lung malignancy, but there are, you can name it, like breast malignancy, liver, and so many other opportunities are there where through public screening we can identify through AI these cases much earlier and put them on treatment. So that's one area. The other area I think Deepak talked about is the drug discovery process is a long journey, and through AI you can quantify the impact the medication is having on the patient in a far more objective way. For example, is the lesion in the lung increasing or decreasing? What are the characteristics of the region? How is it transforming after use of medication? So those biomarkers through AI can be much more sharper, much more accurate, and much more economical to have. And that sense, this can help the development process substantially.
Thanks, Ajit. And I do have to come back to Deepak for the last point. But it's a great point, and there are screening programs that are funded by pharmaceutical companies because they help them reach more number of patients early. And I think it is, and I'll let Deepak answer that question, it will also help quantify better as to what the demand really looks like if they were able to screen a population or have screening programs for different diseases in partnership with the government. They would have a better understanding of what the demand potentially looks like, and not just for India, but juxtapose that on the overall population set as well across the world. But Deepak, your thoughts?
Just building on what Ajit said, I think the opportunity is to look at access as a design principle. And the moment you start looking at access as a design principle, then access and innovation are no longer at odds with each other. Access is the innovation. Of what use is an innovation which people cannot access. And I think there are some very important things that the two parts of healthcare can learn from each other. For example, when you look at access, can you access it in low resource settings? Can you access it at high temperature and humidity? Can you access it with minimal training? Can you access it in multiple languages? Can you bring it to life in a manner that eventually every person is able to use it and it's not a fancy piece of technology lying somewhere on a spreadsheet? So I think that's one learning which can clearly come and get adapted here. Offline working. I mean, you're talking of a country as diverse as India. Can you have offline working in some of these things which can come in? Now, India succeeded in pharmaceuticals by managing chemistry at scale. I think that was the one thing which India did very well. India can succeed here by managing intelligence and data at scale. I think that's the opportunity that lies for us, both in terms of learning, cross-leverage, and creating a closed-loop system in which the diagnosis leads to the treatment and a feedback from the treatment leads to the diagnosis. So that closed-loop system, which is currently fragmented, if that comes into play, I think we have a very compelling opportunity ahead of us.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Ajit, Satish. I have to say that the best outcome out of this session is access is the innovation. And I think that's what we need to live by. And I can give another example on sickle cell, where one of the Indian companies named Acoms has developed a pediatric syrup which is room temperature stable. Now that's a huge innovation when it comes to low and middle income countries, because cold chain is a challenge, and that we faced in the vaccines when it was COVID. It was a critical factor. So I just take this point back from here, that access is the innovation that we are all working towards, and using that to scale beyond the borders. Thank you. Thank you.
So much. Thank you for sharing these valuable insights with us. That was a detailed discussion. Thank you. Requesting you to please step forward for a group picture.